tonight we are in Minneapolis, Minnesota with Nick Lencheski of the Ultimate China Guide. And actually we're in uptown Minneapolis, kind of wanted to hit this area. And tonight I wanted to seek Nick out to interview him and to get the latest and greatest and his perspectives on China. So Nick, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, like Vin said, name's Nick Lencheski. I grew up in Minnesota, small town in Minnesota. Went to college here, studied math, and then after I graduated, I moved to China to teach English. And I had a variety of positions there, teaching in a college at first, and then a friend and I, we opened an English training center there. And from there, it had always been my dream to find a non-teaching job in China, kind of like at a company, doing something else besides teaching, because I didn't plan to be a teacher forever. So I got that job, and then, after 6 years in China, I came back to the U.S. because I hadn't experienced life in the U.S. post-college, and started writing a book called The Ultimate China Guide. I also have a blog called ChinaLifeFiles.com where I also write about how to live and work in China and travel, learn Chinese, and currently I work as a Chinese medical interpreter and translator.
Interesting. So you spent 6 years in China. What was that like? What were some of your experiences, the good and the bad, the pros and cons? Can you kind of touch upon that?
Sure. So China, the thing I love about China is it's always exciting. Like, things are always happening. Like, you walk out the door and there are like new shops being built all over the place, new businesses. It's very entrepreneurial. Like, everyone is kind of like their own little boss. Like, everyone's got side schemes. I love the food there was amazing. So Chinese food, like Sichuan food, Hunan food, Xinjiang food. These are all the different places in China that you can get. China, they always say in China, Chinese people are crazy about food, basically. And so they have food from all different parts of China that is delicious, as you'll find out. Another thing I love in China is the travel. So there are a lot of really beautiful places in China. Western China, especially like Qinghai, Tibet, Xinjiang province. Well, those are kind of the basics. And then I like languages, so speaking Chinese with Chinese people I find very fun.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, you wrote the book called The Ultimate China Guide. Can you kind of go back and tell me how that was inspired, and then tell us a little bit about what it's about, what the mission, the purpose of the book?
Sure. So I wanted to write a book that would help people like me before I went to China, basically. So I had never been to China before. When I was 22, I studied abroad in Greece and Italy and spent 4 months traveling around Europe, and I thought, this is amazing. I want to do this some more. And I had friends too that also wanted to teach English abroad or travel abroad again. The easiest way to travel abroad for long term, in my perspective, is teaching English, because as a native English speaker, it is not so difficult to find a job. There are lots of different jobs. They all have different requirements, but that was the main reason for writing the book, is to give people a look at what life in China is like, how they too can go to China, find a job. So the first group of people is people who, maybe they've been to China, or let me start over. So people who they haven't been to China yet, but they're curious about the culture, the language, traveling. Teaching English is a great way to go. You can learn the culture, you can learn the language, you can travel all over with 4 months of paid vacation. So it's a good way to get around China, basically. And then the second group is kind of people more familiar with China. Maybe they've studied abroad there, or studied Chinese there before, or taught English. So this is where the non-teaching job comes in. Maybe somebody wants to find something other than teaching English, because there are so many jobs in China. So let me just back up a little. My story. When I first got to China, teaching English, it was great. But I always thought, wow, wouldn't that be really cool if I could get like a US-based job where they would pay me to live and work in China. So I would be saving lots of money and also doing something that I was more interested in than teaching English. But all the people I knew with those kinds of jobs in China that I saw were engineers, and it seemed like they just happened upon it by chance. So when I finally did find a way to do it, to find a non-teaching job, that was really exciting to me. And I knew there were other people like that. And so I wrote the book for those people who, because a lot of people who seem to end up in China, it's by chance. Like they don't speak Chinese, they don't necessarily want to be there, but they have the job that all the people who do speak Chinese and want to be there have. So my book kind of tries to bridge that gap. And ever since I was a kid, I've enjoyed writing, so that was another reason for the book.
I think it's a great idea because when I was in China too, I don't recall any type of guide that would help you find a job in China or an internship. And with the young people these days, it's really popular to do that type of work their first couple of years out of college. So I'm sure that type of book really helps people like that. So that's really super.
Cool.
So I know locally in the last few years you've been interpreting here in Minneapolis. Can you tell me about that type of work and what that entails?
Sure. So with medical interpreting, there are clinics and hospitals around, in this case Minnesota, that for when they have a Chinese patient come to the doctor's office or the emergency room, because of that language barrier, they need an interpreter to interpret what is being said back and forth. So just also clarify the difference between translation and interpretation. A lot of people don't know this, but translation is written and interpretation is spoken. And what I've primarily been focusing on recently is interpretation. And so basically I'll get a call or an email, usually a few days in advance, to go to a specific hospital or clinic, and then I will go there on the day at that time, meet the Chinese patient, and then interpret for them in their doctor's appointment.
So I've learned that you've got a blog, is that right?
Yeah.
And then you've got obviously the book that we talked about, and that you've been working on some other side things. And I also hear that you've got an interesting, kind of exciting trip coming up. Can you tell me what's happening there, what's the intention and the purpose?
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I'm planning to go to Chiang Mai, Thailand. There's a large group of digital nomads there. If you don't know what a digital nomad is, basically it's someone who can work from an internet connection, so they are not bound by location, so they can live and work wherever. So the main reason I'm going there, though, is to work on continuing my entrepreneurial journey, my business. So like you mentioned, I have a blog, ChinaLifeFiles.com, and the blog is kind of an extension of my book, How to Teach English, Travel, Learn Chinese, and Work in China. And on there, I am also in the process of creating an online course that will step people through the process of finding these different types of jobs in China, whether it's teaching or non-teaching, like translating or sales or engineering, that kind of thing. So that's where I'm going.
So that's pretty exciting. That's coming up very soon here?
Yeah, a month or two, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Now, what would you tell or give some advice to some young people that are thinking about studying abroad, or they want to do an internship in China or Asia? What's a couple things that you'd like to maybe share with them?
I think the most important thing is to go there, to just go there and see. Maybe, just see if you like it. Maybe you can teach English there, go there, see if you like it. There are a lot of people that don't like living in China. I've definitely had a lot of moments where I did not like living in China, like we all have, all have those like China days where just nothing is going right, and you're like, why can't we do this like the American way, or like the Canadian way, or the Australian way? But make sure that you like it. Talk to other people who have been to China before. Do study abroad program, learn the language. Like if you're interested in languages, even if you're not interested, I think it's a good idea to just start learning some Chinese. Like start talking to people. There are lots of meetup groups. Like here in Minnesota, there's like a really active Chinese language meetup. You could do that. There are lots of different, if you just go online and type in, like learn Chinese or like books about China. That's another thing I think is reading books about China. Wild Swans is a really good history book about China. Coming Home Crazy is another title.
Okay. Well, great. And then most important of all, they could pick up your book, right? And where could they do that?
Obviously, yeah. You could go on Amazon, type in jobs in China, you'll find it. Or you can go to my website, ChinaLifeFiles.com, and you'll see links to it there.
Okay, great. Well, before we close out today, is there any last parting words that you'd like to leave the viewers?
I think if you're excited about going to China, I think you should go do it. If you want to find a non-teaching job in China, I think you should work your network, look on some specific job boards. I have a list of those on my website if you're interested in the non-teaching job boards. So.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Nick. You left us a lot of words of wisdom and thoughts about working, studying in China, which is a really important component these days. And thank you for your work. And we'll hopefully meet up with you in Asia and talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Vin.